Rand, I need another episode of Fully Cinematic.
Nearly a decade into the 21st century, celebrity director James Cameron combined his penchant for astronomical production budgets with the niche gimmick of 3D imagery, which resulted in the famed auteur topping himself with the then newest and still highest grossing movie of all time, not adjusting for inflation. It was probably inevitable that we eventually go down this particular cinematic path. So pack some blueberries, bring your own bottle of Hypnotic, and join me on a trip to Pandora as we take a look back at Avatar. And oh yeah, there will be spoilers. We're introduced to our story via narration by our hero, Jake Sully. We meet Jake, a paraplegic Marine Force recon veteran on the resource-depleted Earth of the year 2154, where most people wear face masks. He explains that the technology to repair his body exists. It just happens to be cost prohibitive. After witnessing a blonde getting the fire smacked out of her in a dive bar, our would-be white knight intervenes only to be snatched up and dumped on his head in the alley outside, which is where he's approached by a couple of suits who inform him that his twin brother Tommy is dead. We learn that Tommy was stabbed to death during a robbery, and following a hasty cremation, Jack accepts the suit's offer to replace his late brother on a 6-year research mission off-world. Tommy earned a PhD in a related field and trained specifically for the mission for 3 years. But since they have identical DNA, Jake's utter lack of qualifications is intentionally overlooked. After a 5-year, 9-month, 22-day trip in cryosleep, Jake and a group of jarheads arrive at a moon in the Alpha Centauri system, Pandora, where the Resources Development Administration hopes to mine an uber-valuable native mineral cartoonishly named unobtainium. Upon disembarking, craggy head of security Colonel Miles Quaritch informs the new arrivals that many of them will likely die. Jake soon introduced to the head of the Avatar program, exobiologist Dr. Grace Augustine. Ava who, you ask? Essentially, scientists have developed bodies resembling the blue-skinned, 10-foot-tall giants native to Pandora, the Na'vi. Because the moon's atmosphere is poisonous to the human respiratory system, a select few operators pilot the lab-grown giants via a neural link. Each avatar has been specifically created with its pilot's DNA in order to ensure compatibility. Anyway, Augustine, who happens to be Jake's supervisor, hates him immediately because 1, he's not Tommy, and more importantly, 2, he's a Marine. Ain't that a bitch? So she's rude and hates on him to his face. Get some therapy, lady. Unbeknownst to the girl boss from hell, Colonel Quaritch meets with Jake in secret and recruits him to serve as a spy, gathering intel for him on the giant Smurfs. His promised reward for being a two-faced double-dealing prick is a brand new pair of working legs, compliments of his Scarface co-conspirator. Sully, who Augustine has demoted to bodyguard, escorts her and research assistant Dr. Norm Spellman into the brightly colored forest, where they're attacked by a wild animal, which is apparently impervious to the ammo fired by the gargantuan automatic rifles designed to be used by avatars. After Jake is chased into the bush, the others abandon him and haul ass back to base in a chopper. That night, Corporal Sully is attacked by another pack of hostile people eaters and only survives due to the timely intervention of native girl Pocahontas. Neytiri. Funny enough, Neytiri was targeting Jake before she decided to save him instead. This goodwill is short-lived as she plans to immediately leave him to the mercy of the elements. But after she busts his ass in the face with her bow, Jake manages to convince her to take him home. Her rescue notwithstanding, Neytiri has an attitude and acts like a dick the entire time. When they arrive at Ewok Village, Jake meets the parents. And what do you know, her father, Etukan, is the chief of her Omatakaya clan. Her mom, Moet, is the tribe's high priestess, and she orders her daughter to babysit Jake and to teach him their customs. But although Princess Neytiri is clearly attracted to the new kid on the block, she's headed for an arranged marriage to Sute, the tribe's greatest warrior, who's set to inherit the throne someday. Now, Neytiri is teacher since Cameron Diaz. She's impatient, calls her charge a moron, smacks him when he gives wrong answers, and repeatedly throws him into dangerous situations he's ill-equipped to handle without properly preparing him. But despite her trash tutelage, Sully not only survives, he manages to learn how to hunt the wildlife, ride space horses, and jockey a pastel-colored pterodactyl. He's taught how to bond with said beasts by mingling his weird hair appendages with theirs. During a ride on his flying steed, Jake's attacked by an even larger pteranodon called a Toruk. Back at HQ, Quaritch expresses doubts about his spy's loyalties, ready to terminate the undercover op. But Two-Face convinces him to allow him to continue for a little longer. Later at the village, Neytiri shows Jake how to communicate with the voices of her ancestors by interfacing with the Tree of Life via his dreads. Afterwards, he gives her the business, which bonds them as life mates. The morning after, ginormous RDA bulldozers begin destruction on the area, and one of the machine's cameras captures footage of Sully as he destroys one of its lenses. When the new couple arrives at the community meeting, Sute attacks Jake. Elsewhere, Quaritch disconnects him from his Smurf body. When Sute attempts to slit his avatar's throat, Neytiri attacks him in turn. Simultaneously, Quaritch exposes Jake's treachery following Grace's revelation that Pandora contains a global neural network. After corporate exec Parker Selfridge agrees to give them 1 hour before commencing demolition, Sully confesses his espionage to the villagers in an attempt to convince them to evacuate. A heartbroken Neytiri rejects him, and the two avatars are tied up not long before the Leathernecks attack, first with gas, then with incendiaries. Desperate, Moat releases the avatars moments before a missile strike on the behemoth home tree, where the Omaticaya made their home, during which pilot Trudy Chacon goes AWOL, and Etukan is mortally wounded. The RDA then disconnects Jake and Grace from their Smurfs again, but Trudy subsequently busts their human bodies out of the being before flying them and Spellman back to Sherwood Forest. However, Quaritch manages to clip Grace with a gut shot during the jailbreak. The escapees meet the tribe at the fabled Tree of Souls after Sully commandeers the notorious Toruk, a brightly colored, supersized pterodactyl, displaying his status as the Chosen One. Securing Sute's support, Kevin Costner takes Grace's body to the Soul Tree to undergo an unsuccessful ritual intended to permanently transfer her consciousness from her human form to her avatar. He then rallies the Omaticaya and the other clans in a far-reaching alliance against the Sky People. Afterwards, Jake prays to Awa, the Na'vi deity, for help in the coming battle to protect the Spirit Tree. Because of magnetic anomalies in the area, RDA's tracking and targeting systems are unreliable, evening the odds. And just as Neytiri faces certain death, Endor's wildlife joins the fray, fighting alongside the tribesmen. Quaritch narrowly escapes his crashing airship in an amplified mobility platform, or AMP suit, and naturally he and Sully square off, during which Major Payne accuses his nemesis of being a race traitor. And surprise, surprise, Smurfette delivers the killing blow to Colonel Sanders. Pocahontas finally sees her new husband's real face, and with his last breaths, Sute insists that Jake inherit his throne after killing him in a tribal ritual. The RDA is subsequently evicted from Fern Gully, and John Smith's consciousness is transferred to his Smurfatar. Cue the credits song.
Why did you let yourself do this?
The same year the Avatar debuted, star Sam Worthington also headlined what was at the time the latest entry in another James Cameron sci-fi franchise, Terminator Salvation. The following year, he starred in a much-improved remake of 80s cult flick Clash of the Titans. What little is said of Worthington's other features, the better. Per his custom, Cameron also cast an actor with whom he's worked before, Alien Sigourney Weaver. And once again, he sent her to a distant moon in order to work with a Marine during a mission involving hostile extraterrestrials. Michelle Rodriguez is along for the ride as the new version of tough Latina military chick Vasquez. And powered exoskeletons show up as well. In stark contrast to Cameron's first movie involving aliens, his third would take a sympathetic yet somewhat condescending look at off-worlders. Swapping the Lakota for the otherworldly Na'vi, JC essentially recycled Dances with Wolves and gave it a futuristic setting, leaving the white savior narrative firmly in place. Or if you prefer, a space-age remix of Disney's Pocahontas. You know, the movies featuring a foreign white guy coming around and hooking up with a female member of an indigenous tribe. Only when his fellow invaders threaten to seize the land for themselves violently and fatally, he's the one who steps up and saves the natives, as though they're incapable of fighting their own battles, especially given their intimate familiarity with the terrain. You know, the familiarity that none of the outsiders could possibly match. The film would have benefited greatly from positioning Jake as a sidekick to an actual Na'vi, who turns out to be the chosen one and supreme leader. And lest you be fooled by Grace and Trudy's sympathetic presentations as heroes, be aware that they each accepted and or continued to perform jobs with the RDA as a researcher and pilot respectively, knowing full well that the company planned to displace indigenous people in order to exploit their land. Grace was an eyewitness to the massacre that took the life of Natiri's sister. And as a Marine fly girl, it's likely that Trudy gave the killers a ride to the scene of the crime. But there is differently abled representation, so whatever, I guess. Have you ever wondered why every single fantasy spectacle to hit theaters is available in both standard and 3D format? The fact that this Technicolor piece grossed $2.8 billion at the box office is the reason. If you've never seen Avatar, congratulations. You saved yourself 2 hours and 42 minutes worth of torture and a couple $1,000s in inflated ticket prices. If you really have a craving for a jungle adventure involving alien life and the military, do yourself a favor and watch Predator instead. And if you want to see a movie about a guy who travels to another world, becomes physically stronger, falls for a native woman, wins over the planet's indigenous inhabitants, and helps to save them from his own kind, then watch Man of Steel. In other news, it's time to check out some comments that we got on other shows. In response to the Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons early review, Maverick BBQ said, on the list. After watching the Lady Makers interview with Jasmine Guy and Eric W. Davis, Fresh Out the Shower said, I'm definitely going to put this one on my list. I'm sold. And please take me with y'all to the studio. Wow, I can't wait for part 2. And laughing emojis at Jasmine's response to John not seeing School Days. Yeah, Fresh, that had me rolling too. Shout out to Maverick BBQ and Fresh Out the Shower for dropping comments. And shout out to everybody who hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But I've had enough of this conversation and this movie, so I'm logging off.
Fully Cinematic.